Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
All right, guys, welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, as always, presented by our friends at ScentLok. ScentLok is a complete toolkit for bow hunters. I actually just got my grinder tree stand pack from ScentLok, and it's very well designed, beautifully built. And again, they're just furthering their toolkit for bow hunters. So whether you need some new clothes or a backpack or some ozone products, go check out our friends over at ScentLok. I've got a good friend on the phone, a buddy of mine, a fellow Bear Archery guy, Mr. Warren Holder. Warren, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
Oh, it is. It's currently 11 degrees here in Kansas, so as good as you can be when it's 11 degrees, I guess.
Yeah, it's not much better here. I woke up this morning and I think it was 0 with a real feel of -19.
Golly.
Yeah. I was like, and it was 60 on Sunday.
Yeah, no, it's the same way here. We were, I think Monday we were at the park in shorts and a t-shirt, and then Tuesday morning it was like 6 degrees, and I'm like, good Lord. My wife actually, Monday she turned the heater off, and I didn't know it. And so Tuesday, like 3 a.m., I wake up and my house is freezing cold, and I'm like, why is my house so cold? And so I wake up and like the Alexa shows me that it's like 7 degrees outside, and then I go and look at the thermostat, says off, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so I told her, I'm like, this is why you don't touch the thermostat. Like, this is it. And she's like, well, I didn't know it was going to be cold. And I'm like, I know. That's why you don't touch the thermostat, because you didn't know this was going to happen.
Right.
It's crazy, man.
That's pretty good insulation if it was still 60, though.
Yeah, it does.
That's pretty good, really.
Well, it did. I mean, it didn't take long, because it overnight it dropped and my house was freezing cold. But doesn't make for shooting a bow outside very fun, though. I know that.
Dude, I haven't even, from the time that I've been shooting my recurve, I think I've shot outside like once. And at one time it was like probably 15, 20 mile an hour winds. And that's when I really learned it already. Just like, holy cow, without the speed, like I was like, okay, now I understand why all these guys are shooting 650, 700 grain arrows, because that wind will just sail your arrow when it's only going, 170 some feet per second or whatever.
Oh, it certainly will. Now, Warren has already alluded to it. We're here to talk about his journey into traditional archery. So before we jump in, let me give a quick thank you to our friends over at Three Rivers. Three Rivers, if you are getting into traditional archery, Three Rivers is absolutely invaluable. Now, anybody who shoots traditional, they're valuable because they are the largest in-store same-day shipping for traditional equipment in the country. But for people getting into it, there's such a wealth of knowledge. I called Three Rivers, just called them like 2 days ago, and I'm like, I need your help. And they gave me all the information I needed. They're a wealth of knowledge. They have everything you could ever dream of traditional-wise. And like I said, same-day shipping. Go check out Three Rivers Archery. I know Warren just got a package from them with some goodies. It's always a fun day when Three Rivers shows up. Oh, yeah. I've already been buying a bunch of stuff from, and then like with the recurve, there's things that you just feel like, I don't really know how much purpose it serves. I just feel like I have to have it on my bow, like the beaver deal. Yeah. Like the beaver balls or whatever. Like, I'm sure that it makes a difference, but I don't know if it could really make that much difference. But it's just like, right. Hey, all those guys' bows looks cool, so I have to have it on mine. That was my biggest appeal, really. Getting into it was like everything is an art. Like everything is a piece of like leather hooded quivers opposed to like mass produced plastic quivers. And you know what I mean? It's just everything is a work of art. I mean, each individual bow is a work of art. All those beaver balls, all the string. I mean, everything is just it's a work of art, man. Oh yeah. The more and more I'm looking into this stuff is the more and more I see these guys that like their arrows. It's like a craft, they've
all got a certain crest and their fletchings are all a certain way. I mean, just like you do with a compound, but it's like you said, it feels a little more artistic, I think, with it being the old school way. So I really like that aspect. Now I'm still having to figure out how to tie my beaver balls on there. So I'm probably gonna have to call Three Rivers, because I know it shouldn't be that difficult. But I'm just when you're so new to something, it's really good, I think, honestly, to be able to start something again that is related to something you know a lot about, but it's so different because it reminds you what you didn't know. Like when you start with a
100%.
compound and somebody brand new starts shooting, you're like, well, of course the release goes like this, and they don't know which way the release goes. So now doing something brand new again myself, I'm like, okay, well, I got to remind myself that you don't know what you
100%.
don't know. And it's not all that simple. You really learn how much you've learned over the years by just seeing those things.
Well, and the biggest question I've gotten, because I'm only a year and a half into this, but the biggest question I've gotten is, has shooting a recurve made you better with your compound? And my answer to that is, like, the act of shooting the recurve did not, but forcing myself to execute a shot and work on the execution of that shot did translate into shooting a compound better, because I broke everything about my shot down to evaluate it and to make it better for a recurve. So then when I went into shooting a compound, all the mechanics are there. So I broke my shot process completely down to learn it with a recurve. So shooting a recurve did not make me a better archer, but the fact of relearning everything, like you said, and going back to the basics and breaking everything down, then I took it and applied it to my compound, and that did make me a better shot. So I could have achieved that without going to a recurve. Like, I could have, taken a summer to break everything down with a compound and do the same thing, but switching to a recurve forced me to do it.
Yeah, that's one thing that I think I've noticed, is this is going to sound probably really, really backwards, I guess. It's going to sound backwards, or it's going to sound stupid. I think when I first started shooting the recurve, I was almost shooting better than I am now. And the reason that I say that is because I was so detail oriented when I first started, right? I knew that I had no idea what I was doing. So every time I drew, I paid extreme attention to making sure that I anchored exactly the same, that I had the bow, my grip was exactly the same, that I, executed the shot exactly the same. I made sure that my fingers were in the exact same spot. I made sure that everything was exactly the same. And so that's what I realized. I think when you start to get comfortable a little bit, you start to cut corners. You're like, oh, I kind of know what I'm doing now. And then with the recurve, it shows you can't cut corners, because you won't miss by an inch, like you will with your compound, or 2 inches. You miss by 4 or 5 inches, and then it's like, holy crap, I'm not even in the ballpark.
Yeah.
So
no, you're absolutely correct. And that's what the best advice I ever got from somebody, which was Harv Ebers, who has become one of my bow hunting heroes. He was actually just inducted into the Pope and Young Hall of Fame. Was personal friends with Fred Bear. Well, anyways, I drove to Missouri. When I got into this, I'm like, I just want to learn, like, from the best from the get-go. So I drove to Missouri, and I spent a day with Harv, and I'm like, dude, you got to teach me everything about shooting a recurve. And he gave me a shot process, and he's like, you have to work through this shot process every time, whether it's at 4 yards or whether it's at 40 yards, whether there's a giant buck standing in front of you or a foam target. You have to force yourself to work through this process every time with a recurve. And now I find myself still, every time I shoot, I have verbal cues that I give myself. Obviously, when I'm hunting, I don't out loud say them, but, verbal cues that I walk through every time. And what he said was, it's going to do exactly what you said it's going to do. It's going to force you to every shot do it the exact same, but also that mind control of when a big buck is standing there, you have something else you're completely thinking about. Like, you're not thinking about the big buck at all. You're thinking about your shot process. And he said something to me that I remind myself a lot of in this journey, and that's, like, you can't control anything that happens downrange. So don't worry about that. Like, you can't control what the deer does. You can't control what the wind does. You can't control, if a bird flies in front of your arrow and you hit the bird instead. You can't control any of that. But what you can control every single shot is your execution. And so my shot execution is I think about and cheesy acronym, but I use the acronym of GASP, and that's grip. I think about the grip of my bow. I think about my hook and how I'm placing my hook. Then I come to my anchor point, and then I pick a spot, and then it's pull, pull, pull through my shot. And I think about that every shot, and it does exactly what you said. Like when you start, you think through all those things and you process all those things. And so I just wanted to force myself into a lifetime of that shot process.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's it's really interesting you say that, because I was just yesterday, I feel like I was just getting far enough along in my um, journey here to start establishing a shot process. Right before, I've been playing around with everything. I've been playing around with, I guess my hook is what you would call it, my grit, exactly where I wanted to anchor, how I'm going to aim. Am I aiming? Am I going to use the point of the arrow? Am I going to use hold the arrow a little low? What was I going to do? So I was still having to learn all of those things before I could even make a process out of it and say, hey, this is what it is. This feels good. Now I'm going to replicate this. I'm going to do it exactly the same every time.
Right.
So it's been a really interesting process so far. Do you ever, so for me, well, one, I feel like this could be a really interesting question. So let's ask this before we get too far in. What made you decide to embark on the traditional journey?
I'll tell you, it started off just like, hey, I want to do it. There was no, and it was really for fun, just, hey, I want to plink around in the backyard. Bear sent me a recurve probably 3 years ago, and it sat on my shelf, and I looked at it, I'm like, man, that's so cool. And then Jim Willems, who at the time was the president of Pope and Young, we were hanging out, and he's a trad guy, and so he was at my house shooting, and I'm like, well, dude, why don't you teach me how to plink around with this thing? And so I started shooting in the backyard, and then I've got his permission to say this, so don't I have to don't start emailing John Dudley all mad that he says traditional archers aren't accurate, because I'll get to what I mean in a minute. But I was on the phone with John Dudley, and he said, well, I don't shoot a recurve because I like to be accurate. And in that moment, I'm just the kind of guy where I'm like, well, I'm going to prove to you that I can be accurate with this thing. And so that's when I set off on the journey. I want to know everything I can. Arrow tuning, broadhead tuning, I wanted to know everything. And that's when I really did a deep dive, and I was calling Three Rivers daily, and I was calling Tom Clum daily, and Harv and Jim, and I was calling them daily, asking questions. And that's when I really wanted to tackle being good at this. When he said that. Now, let me go back and say, because in another conversation, he explained to me what he meant. He can't be accurate with a recurve. He was not saying that people can't be accurate with a recurve. So that's why I said, don't start calling him saying, I'm accurate, whatever. It's not what he was saying, but he was saying, I can't be accurate with a recurve. But I still use that as kind of my John Dudley says this, I'm going to do it. You know what I mean?
Did he claim what he defines as accurate, though? Did he say, when see that? I think that can make it a little harder too to qualify that question.
Yeah, he didn't bring that up. Mainly because I knew what he meant. I knew what he meant, and most guys would. He's not putting down any traditional archers. That's not what he was doing. I've actually heard him rave about traditional archery. That's not what he was doing. But in that moment, it just triggered me to be like, well, I'm going to prove to you that I can be accurate with a recurve.
Yeah.
But I've found this, man, and I'm not looking for anybody to call BS on me or start emailing me that I'm wrong or whatever. But if you put in work, I found that I can hit the same baseball at 20 yards with my recurve as I can my compound. I can be accurate. Now, am I going to hit an aspirin at 30 yards? No. Am I going to hit a ping pong ball at 60? No. But can I put it in the same kill zone at 30 with both bows? Yes. And so, man, I'll tell you what it is for me, though. The first time I took out hunting, I told you about this off air. I was javelina hunting in South Texas, literally 3 miles from the border, and I had my recurve. And the whole first day, I didn't fire an arrow, but that was the funnest hunt of my life. It felt different,
Yeah.
because I had a javelina at 27 yards, and I was only like 4 months into this. I'm like, I'm not shooting 27 yards. And just like the going back and forth, like I come to full draw like 3 times. And it was just a blast, man. And it really, truly, and this sounds stupid and this sounds cheesy, but it gave me back a love for hunting that I had lost. Just that pure, raw excitement of hunting and getting close to an animal. It gave that back to me. And so it's just, I tell people, like, I'm not traditional only. I'm not compound only. I want to hunt with both. I like hunting with both. I love shooting my compound still. But just hunt with whatever's going to make you enjoy the hunt more. Like if you need to go out and kill animals for food or for, you know, in your case, a TV show or what, like if you have to kill an animal, yeah, probably grab the compound. But if you want to go out and just enjoy a hunt and enjoy watching animals and getting closer to animals, take your recurve.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately for me, with the way our show is, I don't have to kill something, you know?
Yeah.
Otherwise, who knows if I'd be making a wise decision or not. But yeah, I'm glad I don't have that pressure, because that would be a lot of pressure. But
now, I will say this though, 2 times this year, two verifying moments for me on the recurve. I was in Oklahoma and I had my compound and I shot a doe at 17 yards. And as I was at full draw, obviously I didn't spend minutes thinking about this, but as I was at full draw, I literally thought to myself, I'm like, I would feel better off shooting this with my recurve. I would feel more comfortable shooting this with my recurve because I had put so much time and effort into it, and I knew that I could make that shot. And I was like, I would feel more confident with my recurve. And that's when I knew, I'm like, okay, I need to hunt more with my recurve. And then secondly, I was in Kansas and I have my compound and a nice buck comes in. And I sent a lot of videos of this buck to different people. And they're like, dude, why didn't you shoot that? And I'm like, well, if I would have had my recurve, I would have. And because it was like 8 yards. And I'm like, if I would have had my recurve, I would have. And so many people responded back like, then why take your compound? Like, if that's what compounds are to you now, why take it? And, you know, meaning like if the compound is now the crutch to say like, oh, he's not big enough to shoot it with my compound, but you would have the joy of shooting with your recurve, then why take the compound?
yeah.
And so those were 2 really defining moments in my season where I ended up spending a lot more time with the recurve.
So do you think you're going to be going all traditional then this year?
No. And again, I kind of want to, but at the same time, I still enjoy hunting with my compound. You know, I enjoy both. My purpose of switching to a recurve was not to be traditional only. My purpose of switching to a recurve was to be a more well-rounded archer. So if I go traditional only, then I'm being less well-rounded, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I don't want to limit myself. Now, last year was like 50-50. This year will probably be like 80-20, 80% recurve, 20% compound. And I can tell you the compound hunts will probably be like doe hunts. You know, or hunts where I know I'm going to be shooting a management buck or something like that. But again, I just enjoy hunting with the compound still. So yeah, I do believe that traditional will become my primary source of hunting.
Yeah. The reason I asked that is just because I've decided I'm going full traditional, and I think that
all year,
everything, 100% of the time.
Nice.
So,
like you mean like from here on out or for this year?
Probably from here on out, but I don't want to say that that's set in stone. We'll have to see how it goes. But
why is that?
Well, so the reason for me is, you know, I've been really blessed. You know, I've been able to do, for my age, I've gotten to do a ton of hunting, and I've gotten to kill a lot of animals. You know, I'm like, I keep a book of all of the animals I've ever been able to kill, the locations, everything, so that I don't ever forget anything. But it's just cool to be able to go back in that log and see that. And I think I'm up to like 70 or 75 animals with my bow at 26. And so I'm like, man, I'm freaking spoiled. And the last thing that I had that I just like really, really wanted to kill was a big bull. I just really wanted a big bull with my bow more than anything on earth. I love elk hunting. I live to elk hunt. And so I just wanted one of those beautiful representation, you know, just a big bull. And I got really fortunate this year and killed a really good bull in Wyoming. He was, just under 340. And one of the guys I was with actually killed his bull with a recurve at 4 yards. And so that was super awesome. And then I came back to Iowa and got really fortunate and killed a big deer. And so then for me, the reason I'm going into it is after I killed that deer, I've killed 3 deer that are all 172. Every single one of them is like 172. And for me, I kind of always have to have like a goal or something I'm going after next. And so I felt like, okay, what is my goal now? What do I have to do next? It's not that I'm trying to kill the biggest deer out there that I can. But it was like, okay, I've hit the same mark 3 different times. And so I felt like I was in a position where, and I've had traditional, floating around in my head for a while, but the main reason I hadn't done it is I'm an all-in kind of guy. So if I was going to go traditional, I'm going all traditional. And I knew that if I went traditional and then went on an elk hunt and I had a 330 bull or whatever, a big bull come by at 40 yards and I couldn't shoot because I had a recurve, that I don't think I would be able to sleep at night. Now I don't know that, but knowing myself, I think it would just eat me alive because I wanted that big bull so bad. So now that I've been able to accomplish that goal, I don't care about that part as much anymore. And then for deer, I'm not the guy that's like, man, I want to kill 180 and 190 every year. And really that's where I felt like I was. Either I need to be if I'm going to try and continue to progress, then I either need to try to kill a bigger deer next year or I go traditional. And for me, I don't really care about killing bigger deer. I just want to kill a mature deer. And I don't care if he's 145 or 195. I mean, I'm a mass guy anyways, like just the most massive deer I can find. That's the one I want to stick my arrow in. So I was like, all right, I don't care about trying to kill a bigger deer. I care more about hunting and that next challenge. And I feel as though traditional brings a whole new realm to it. And something that, is totally different. And then I really started looking at too, that's actually kind of how I got to that, is I was looking through my book, right? And all of my whitetails, every buck I've killed, the furthest I've shot one is 30. My average range is like 17.5 or something like that. My 3 biggest deer was 25, 6 and 6. Both of them were the last 2 were at 6 yards. I mean, right underneath me. I could have shot him with a recurve, could have shot my bull with a recurve. Probably. He was 25 yards. I think that by September, I'll be comfortable enough at 25 yards that I could make that shot. And so to me, it was just the next progression, and I knew I was going to have to go all in. So I envy you. I don't think I could go to my compound and then go to my recurve and bounce back and forth like that, especially too, because I find myself at times when I get frustrated with the recurve, like, man, it would be nice to grab my compound right now, because I know I'd stick 3 in the center of that circle, where the recurve's forcing me to progress. Right now, I have to figure out what that problem was and I have to fix it.
Well, there's never that euphoric high with a compound. Like, there's never that, holy crap, I hit it. You know what I mean? Like, when you're shooting a compound, you're either shooting good and you're satisfied, or you're shooting bad and you're ticked off.
Yes.
With a recurve, you're either drilling it and you're like, dude, this is the greatest thing ever, or you're shooting bad and you're like, okay, got to work on it.
Yeah.
There's never that euphoric high with a compound. I remember I had been like 7 months into the recurve, and I went and I got out my compound, and my 3Ds in the backyard were all set up for shooting a recurve, so they're all like 30 and in. And I have 9 3D targets, so I took out 9 arrows with my compound, and they're all 30 yards and in. So they're literally punched in the center of the heart, and I'm like, all of them, and I'm like, well, that was cool, I guess,
Right.
And that's when I'm like, why shoot a compound? Like, why go out daily and shoot a compound when I can go out daily and feel that euphoric, holy crap, I just hit the antelope at 32 yards feeling, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I will say this though, you said you hope you can be at 25 yards by next year, depending on the way that you go. As far as aiming, you'll find that I shoot the very best at 32 yards, better than I do at 12, because at 12 I'm holding the point of my arrow 4 feet under the deer. You know what I mean? I'm literally under his feet, and so it's like, it's really, that muscle mind connection is just hard to reach because you're aiming at a leaf 3 feet in front of his feet. But at 32, I'm right below the target, so I can dot the eye. So I hold it right under the belly, and I'm hitting the kill spot. So I find that I shoot really good at 32.
Have you tried the string walking?
I did, and I shoot such a heavy arrow now that I used to string walk my first bow. I string walked because my point on was like 62 yards, and I'm like, well, I'm never gonna shoot that. Now that I'm shooting a heavier arrow, I'm running like let's see here. I'm changing it up for the new Bear broadhead, which is 175 grains, and I'm running 45, so 220 out front. So I'm running 220 out front when the new Bear broadhead comes out, and so my point on, like I said, is right under 32, and that's super good for me, because then at 20, which is where most of my shots come, I'm right under the belly, and I feel really comfortable with that. So I haven't string walked just because my point on is where I want it. So I haven't had to with the last two bow setups because I've shot a heavier arrow.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing that. I can't wait till we have a little better weather so I can get outside and play with it more, and try more varying distances. But I'm planning on, I'm comfortable enough right now that I can turkey hunt with it. But that's exactly what you just said. It was my concern is I'm looking at that and I'm like, man, a turkey isn't that big of a target, right? I got, maybe a little bit, maybe like a little bit bigger than a softball or something to hit. And if I have to like aim at his spurs almost, or his legs, I think that's going to be really hard for me to pick out that right spot. So that I didn't even know that I was a string walker. I guess I was just messing around with the bow. Like I try to watch videos and stuff, but and some of them are really helpful when it's an exact thing, but I just get bored. I'd rather just go play with something and figure it out. And so I just started doing that, just moving my anchor down until I was able to pretty much put the arrow right underneath it. And then I was like, holy crap, I'm way more accurate like this. And I know I could, if I have a turkey at 10 yards, I'm going to be able to put it right there. That's one thing I've noticed. If you try to explain that to a compound archer or someone who hasn't done traditional at all, they're like, oh, 10 yards, that should be an easy shot. And I'm like, well, if you are anchoring the same, and you're having to aim at their feet, I think it's a lot harder than your point on, because it's a little bit of an estimate no matter what you do.
Right. Yeah. No. So are you string walking or are you changing your anchor point?
I don't know. I don't know the terms yet. So basically I've taken serving, right? And I just tie a little knot on. So like 17 yards is all I can get out of the shop here. So at 17 yards, I've got an anchor, I guess. So I'm just moving my anchor, which
gotcha.
So I'm moving down to that where I have that serving tied.
Yeah.
So what is that called?
That's string walking.
That is string walking. Okay. And so then like I've got another one, for like 25. And then I think I've only gotten to shoot outside once, so I don't even know what my point on is yet.
Right.
But it's probably right about 30 from what I'm getting. But like, in the shop at 17 yards, I know that my point on is right on that bottom serving that I have. And that's helped me a ton on my shooting. But I do.
Are you shooting a full length arrow?
No, it's like probably 29 and a half or something like that. I'd have to measure it.
So the longer your arrow, the closer your point on will be.
Right.
So that's one thing I did used to. I was shooting a lighter arrow and it was cut to 29. So it was, my point on was again something ridiculous like 63. Like something I was never gonna shoot. Now I'm shooting a full length arrow that's a lot heavier, so my point on is at 32, which I really enjoy, because I told myself anything inside my backyard is my effective range. Like I want to be able to, if it's to step in my backyard, I can shoot it. And so for me, that's 32 yards. Anywhere in my backyard, I've got 3D set out from 4 yards to 32. So that's what I told myself. And then my point on happened to be my max effective range. And I'm like, perfect. Like that's what I wanted. So that worked out for me. So I don't string walk on this bow, but I have on past bows.
So so that's something I'm going to have to get way more into that I haven't done yet, is I'm going to have to get into the tuning aspect a little bit more and the arrow setup and all that.
Oh, Lord.
That's why I haven't done much yet with it. Cause I know if it's like a compound, which in some terms, it seems as though it could be almost more complex than a compound.
In my opinion, it's way more complex.
Okay.
Well, it's simpler, but it's more complex. Meaning, like you can take any arrows and tune them to any compound, essentially. I mean, unless they're way overspined or way underspined. Like I
Yeah.
can't tune my wife's 600 spine arrows to my 70-pound bow. But I don't, as far as weight goes, changing 125 grains out front to 100 grain out front, or an inch on your arrow, inch off your arrow, like all those things, like you can tune a bow to. However, with a recurve, you've really got to tune that bow to those arrows. So like you've got to look at, if it's cut out of center or past center, you've got to look at the length of the arrow, the tip weight, the nock height, the brace height, and then you're really tuning that arrow to that bow. And I'll tell you what kind of set me off on this. Like I really enjoy tuning a recurve is I had 400 spine. They're a deer crossing archery silencer shaft. I had 400 spine, and there was like I don't know, say 175 out front. This is all just an example. And then I had a 400 spine hunter from deer crossing archery, and there was like 120 grains out front. I don't remember the exact numbers. And there was some odd like 55 grain difference on the front. And that's substantial, but they both flew like darts. And I'm like, man, that's cool. And so at first I'm like, tuning recurves are easy. Like this is all good. But then I had a bow. Well, this bow here, this is the mag riser, which I got it out to show you something on, and I will in a minute. But this bow was so finicky on the tune. I was running the deer crossing archery silencers, same 400 spine, same draw length, same weight on this bow. It was so finicky, like down to like I was cutting off 1/8 of an inch on my arrow and adding 5 grains out front, and then finally got it to tune. And I'm like, you got to be kidding! Like it took me a week to tune this bow.
So how are you tuning it?
Just adding length. Are
you just shooting it into the target and seeing like which way it kicks, or you actually like paper tune it? You're doing the target way.
Yes, and now target way is kind of, it can lie to you. Like just because your nock is left doesn't mean it's always weak. It could be too stiff and you're bouncing off the shelf to get the left. So I do a lot of slow motion videos. So I'll put my phone up on my deck over my shoulder. That way I can see the way the arrow's flying out of the bow. So you can see, just because you're getting nock high doesn't mean your nock actually is too high. It could be that it's so low that it's kicking up. So the problem with this bow that was making me so mad, I had a bear shaft flight that was perfect. I could shoot bear shafts out to 30. And then I fletched them and I was getting wild kicks. Well, it was like so perfectly tuned that the fletchings were getting kicked. So the fletchings were contacting the riser and kicking the arrow. And so I called a couple buddies, and Tom Klum was like, well, you want to tune your bear shafts a bit weak and high, because a tiny bit, just to give your fletchings enough room.
And this is using the target method?
Yes. He was like, you so perfectly tuned your arrows that your bear shafts that now your fletchings, because when you fletch your arrows, it will stiffen. Adding weight to the back of your arrow will stiffen your spine. So you have them do what?
Just the fletchings will make it stiffer?
Yeah, adding any weight to the back of your arrow. So adding a wrap in vanes or a wrap in feathers will stiffen your arrow. Not tremendously, but it'll stiffen them enough. But like I said, it was just so perfectly tuned that I was adding enough weight to then make that arrow too stiff. And so just little things like that, I'm like, man, it's such a finicky art. And I'll tell you what, it's given me back the joy of like going to my man cave and just tinkering, like just playing with bows. Because now, I mean, with a compound, you have it tuned in an hour and you're going to shoot. But I find myself all the time playing with nock height, brace height, finding different weights on the front of my bows to see if it's going to shoot better or worse, and just all the time tinkering with something. And it's given me that fun back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, see, and that's where you're definitely way further down the road than I am, because I'm at the point right now too where I'm trying to keep it as simple as I can and focus on nothing but me. Which I think that it's kind of interesting because you do that with a compound too, and you realize that as much as we get in depth into it, once we understand what we're doing, it really does just come back to the basics, right? Like I could have an arrow even that's kicking like crazy, and I can still get it to shoot a pretty good group. Now I'm sure that it would fall apart as it got out there. But so like right now I've decided, I'm going to just focus on myself first and getting to where I know that I can, just like a compound. If your shooter has no idea what they're doing, you're never going to be able to get that bow to tune. It's still, you're still going to get arrows that kick. You're going to have torque. It's still going to be a problem. So I'm trying to just focus on me and get myself to the point where I know, when I release that arrow, that I've done everything correct, and that I know the difference in that and a bad shot. Because right now I can tell you, I still have, I'm only like a month into this, so I still can't always. Sure, there's shots where I'm like, man, that felt good. Like that one was right. That felt good. And then I have other ones where I still felt like it was good, and it's nowhere near. And then I also have ones, where I'm like, man, that was bad. That wasn't even close. But so I texted you about that knock high issue I was having. That one was just driving me nuts because I could see it, kicking a ton. And so what I did is same thing, slow-mo video. Actually, I sent you one of the videos, I think.
Yeah.
And so we'll see what you think, because you know more than I do. I don't know if I should have. I saw somebody, I think, said that you should have, put another knocking point underneath that knock to try and keep that arrow more stable. So that, because what I was getting is, you said, is it knock high or whatever? And I messed with the knock height and moved it all over, and it was doing the same thing. So basically what it was doing is that when it would come out of the bow, there was so much flex in that arrow that it was hitting the riser, and then it was just kicking up super bad. Yeah. Like no matter what, you could see the flex in the arrow, that it didn't really matter what you did with the knock height. It had too much flex. So I should have tried tying a knock point on there, but I just took a heavier spined arrow. I went to a 400, which I'm only pulling 40. So it's probably over spined. But as soon as I did that, just a dart, flew perfect. And that's one thing.
What's your draw length?
28 and a half.
Okay.
So it could be too stiff, but it was, when I went to the slow-mo video, that arrow, it had a little flex, but nothing like it wasn't kicking way off of that shelf like the other ones were, which is what gave me that idea. I was like, maybe if I go a little stiffer, then it will make that arrow where it doesn't have so much flex and it's not kicking like that off of the shelf. So that's one thing I want to say, though, that I love about the recurve that I've realized so far is the flight. You really get to watch the flight of the arrow, where with your compound, even you don't get to really see that. Even at like 60, it gets far enough away that unless you're shooting, closer to dark and have a light knock, you don't necessarily get to watch that arrow as much, where being able to see your arrow fly into where you want to hit is pretty freaking cool.
You said, man, I'm envious of, let me tell you, I've been holding this bow to tell you this. Shout out to Fred Eichler. He gave me this tip, and it's changed my life. You were talking about silencers and beaver balls. This is a piece of moleskin, like from Walmart. So it's a pack of 3 for like $1.50.
Yep.
And you only use one pad for one bow, so you literally do like 6 bows for $1.50. But you literally just cut a piece and tape it on like that, and it makes your bow so much quieter.
Moleskin.
It goes like halfway up into the groove where your string would rest.
Okay.
And so, you just cut it to taper with your bow, and it makes your bow so much. I had a friend come over to the house, and he's like, dude, my bow's just so loud. And I'm like, come on, I got some moleskin in the basement. He's like, dude, there's no way this is going to fix like how loud it is. And I'm like, well, first off, your brace height's probably not correct. So let's work on that. And I got a decibel reader app on my phone. And so we just played with his brace height and got his bow like 6 decibels quieter just by adjusting his brace height. Then we added moleskin, and it went down like another 4. So in like 20 minutes, his bow got 10 decibels quieter.
That's so let me ask you this on brace height. When you're adjusting that brace height, right? Twist in mean that it's going to make your brace height longer. Twist into the string, right?
Yes. Adding twists will make it longer.
Does it matter if you take twists and put them into the top or into the bottom, or do you need to do that equally? Like, could you just take the top, the top string, I guess, and put 3 or 4 twists into that? Or do you also need to do the same with the bottom?
That probably matters more than I make it matter. I was actually wondering that myself just the other day. And here's the best conclusion I have not talked to anybody about this yet. I have not asked anybody yet. I have not. But pretty much when you put the string back on the bow, it's going to pull the stretch out. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't just add twists here. Like, it's going to eventually just pull through the string. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because
Now,
it's got an equal amount of pressure on it.
right. And so
But
what I
just
do,
wanted to know if you could be a little bit more on one limb than the other.
yeah. So basically, if I'm doing like one or two twists, I just do it on one. Doesn't matter. If like when I got the new bow and the brace height was on like 6 1/4, and I'm like, I got to add 30 twists to this. That's when I did it equal. And I basically just twisted it together like this. You know what I mean? That's because I was adding
in before.
Do what?
You've put in like 30 twists before?
I mean, I didn't count, but I'm just giving like an example. Like when I get to fine tuning a bow, I just do the top, and because I'm only adding half a twist in to take away a tiny touch of brace height. But if I have to do 5 or 6 twists, then I might consider doing top and bottom. But I really haven't. I was wondering the same thing just the other day, but I just thought to myself, I'm like, I'm twisting it up here, but I'm really twisting the entire string. So I don't know. Good question.
We'll have to ask somebody. I'm going to have to, I think, I'm just trying to get a base, and then I'm going to have to get somebody like yourself or a Kenny or somebody to come out here, or I'm going to have to go to them and just have them give me a class for a day or two, just to be able to go over a bunch of that stuff. Because you're talking on some of these bows, that brace height, even in the manual, it says they can vary by an inch. Yeah. That's a lot of twists,
Yeah. So here's what Fred Eicher told me. Get your bow out and start it at something general, 7.5. Shoot that bow. And it's easier with a friend, but that's why I got the decibel reader app, because then I wouldn't be wrong. And see how that bow shoots, see if it's loud, see if you hear a slap, see if you hear. And he's like, there will be a brace height in which that bow just flat out shoots way quieter and way better. So start at 7.5. Go a couple twists out. Shoot it again. Did it get quieter? Did it get louder? If it got louder, go back the other way. If it gets quieter, keep going until it gets louder. And find where that bow performs the best. And so I start every bow at 8, and then I'm going to, depending on, that's where most of bears are recommended. But, and then I'll take, 2 or 3 twists out, shoot it again, 2 or 3 twists out, shoot it again, 2 or 3 twists up and shoot it again. And just find where it shoots the quietest at. And like I said, I have that decibel reader app, and I'll just mark, okay, 8 1/4, it was the quietest. And that's where I run the bow at.
I'm going to have to try that. Decibel reader app, huh?
I actually did a video on my Instagram just yesterday about it, but it's called Decibel X is the one I use. And you can see it just reads your decibels. And so when you shoot the bow, it's going to give you a peak and show you that peak. And so I just monitor. I will say this. I learned the hard way. I was doing it in my basement, which your shop would probably, 17 yards is enough, but in my basement, I can shoot to like 7. And so the loudest it was picking up was the arrow hitting the target, not my bow shooting. And so every time it was like about the same. And I'm like, it's not changing at all. And then I realized I'm a little too close to my target in my basement, and it's getting that thump of my target, not because it only records like the loudest peak of that recording or whatever. So
right, we're breaking all the trad rules. We're using decibel readers on our recurves.
What's funny is in that video, I did that video, and I said that I'm like, listen, Fred, if this makes you mad, I'm sorry, man. But I don't have a buddy here to help me, so I got to use the app. But I thought the same thing.
We got to bring a little bit of the young guy vibe into it, and some of the technical aspect of things, like watching slow-mo videos and stuff. Because I had one guy tell me that already. I think traditional hunters get a bad rap sometimes. Everybody says that they're kind of can be a little dramatic, right? Which I'm sure not all, but I will say some. Like I had one guy already telling me that basically if you're going to aim, that you shouldn't even shoot a recurve, that you should just shoot instinctual, because that's the right way. And I'm like, man, I got a hard time believing that. I understand the whole goal is that like staying simple and you're getting to the basics. But if I was an Indian, and I knew that I had a more accurate way that it gave me a better chance of killing that deer and feeding my tribe, just because I moved my finger down and I used the end of my arrow to aim, I would have no problem with that. And I would bet Indians did that too. So it's just funny to me that some of the stuff, if you're trying to be more accurate and you're not doing it one specific way, then some people don't like that. But that's with anything. So it's not just those guys.
I've got two problems with that. A is nobody is fully instinctual. Like
No way.
Don't start emailing me. Let me explain first. Everybody wants to use the term analogy of baseball and just throwing a ball. Well, no matter what, baseball players, pitchers have different things they do to throw the ball differently. They four-seam it, they two-seam it, they, to throw a knuckleball, they do different things. They look at certain places. They want to, you know what I mean? They, with the swing of their hand, the whatever. Same with a basketball shooter. Basketball shooters practice repetition over and over and over again, and where to, the flick of their wrist and where they look at the back of the rim or whatever. Same with traditional instinctive shooters. You have a sight picture that you're looking for. Now, you don't think to yourself, okay, I got to hold the tip 3 inches under or whatever, but you have a sight picture that you're looking at. You've just looked at that sight picture so many times that you repeat it. So it's not I'm just fully 100% instinctive. You just practice that sight picture enough to know what you're looking for. So that's my biggest issue. And then the guy that I learned from, Harv Ebers, he's 85. He's as traditional as they come. And I'm not going to tell you what he said because I will make a lot of traditional archers mad. But basically just those guys are all stuck in their ways, and there's no way they can't be as accurate as they want to be because they're not doing it correctly. And I'm like, oh, dang.
Yeah. Shots fired.
Yeah. And he literally, he is from that crowd. He was like, I used to live that. And then I realized he went to Joel Turner and Tom Clum and did their courses and everything. He's like, and then I realized, like, oh, heck, I can't execute a good shot. Like, all we do is pull back and shoot. Well, you can't be accurate that way.
Yeah.
You can't. You can't hit a tennis ball. Again, I don't want to make anybody mad.
I think you're right, though, because I've seen a couple guys that, I remember one guy specifically on a hunt, and, his first arrows at 15 yards even were all over the place. But by his third round, he was pretty good. He was stacking them in there. And I'm like, that's got to be just your subconscious mind coming up with the sight picture, right? He's adjusting. But when you haven't, you were on the road or whatever, out to wherever you're hunting, you didn't shoot for 2 days or something like that. You still got to get your mind something to reference,
right,
again, especially on a different target or whatever the scenario may be. You have to, there's no matter what, you're subconsciously, you have to be aiming to some extent. Now, whether you're anchoring and trying to pick an exact spot that you're aiming, or you're just trying to do that with a sight. I don't know enough about all different ways yet. But to me, it's stupid to say that just because you're trying to maximize accuracy that you're not, there's no point in doing traditional. You might as well put pins on it.
Oh, trust me. I've had guys say that about trad vanes. If you're not going to shoot a feather, then, I've had guys say, if you put a rest on your bow, and I'm like, for real? Like, see, now this is to the point. Now we're talking about the things that turn people off from traditional altogether, and turn people off from archery altogether. Is like, quit being so closed off to everybody else just because they don't do it the way you do it. And we wonder why we push so many people away from the sport when we treat people like that.
Yep. Well, and everybody, I don't care what it is, everybody does things a little bit different. There's going to be things that work for one person that don't work for somebody else. And you got to find what those are for yourself. That's part of the reason I don't watch too many videos until I find those specific things that I want to try to do, is I'm trying to kind of figure out what works for me. What can I do? And what do I understand? And then I'm like, okay, well, now I know that this is a problem for me. I need to try to fix this. And I go and I look for that certain thing.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Before we move on, let me give a quick thank you to my friends over at Selway Archery. On the topic of traditional archery, they are, in my opinion, the best traditional quivers that you could ever buy for your recurve longbow or self bow. They also work with Bear Archery to have their Selway quiver. which is a beautiful Bear Archery branded quiver. It's a slide-on quiver, which, in case you're wondering the benefits of a slide-on, it goes around your limb, and so it acts as a dampener as well. It helps quiet the bow down as well. I'm a huge fan of Selway. I have some incredible. Got a Razorback branded one that I run on my bow that I named Tusk. I've got a Pope and Young branded one, and they are phenomenal quivers. So go check out Selway Archery for all your traditional archery quiver needs. I'm anxious to know, what was the biggest. How long? You're a month in. About?
Yeah, about a month or so.
What's the biggest thing you've learned and taken away already?
You got to be super, super detailed. It seems as though it's simple, but I've realized I got to be extremely detailed. If I don't, it's as simple as if I don't come into my anchor point the exact same every time, that my sight picture is different and I miss, 4 or 5 inches to the left or to the right. Back tension, I believe, matters with a recurve way more than it does with a compound. At least my personal opinion. You guys can't see it there listening to this, but Dylan can see it. Probably, I got this cut on my nose. You see with that cut there? And that
I've had them.
So I don't know. We'll see how you mitigate it, but it was driving me nuts. And so what I'm talking about is, as I was focusing on pulling through the shot, basically my pointer finger would hit my nose. And so the thing that I've realized too, and it's been really in the last week that I've picked up on this, and it's made a huge difference for me, is my hook. So I'm really curious to see what you have to say about this, right? So my hook or my grip, whatever the heck you're supposed to technically call it, when I'm putting my fingers on the string, that if I'm trying to hold that too tight, my shots are terrible. Because even though I may, truly use back tension and that shot breaks, I'm left or I'm right, and I think guys call it plucking the string. I can feel that, and I can feel it all through. It affects my entire shot. So I have to be, every time that I put my fingers on that string, I'm really, really conscious about trying to make them as relaxed as possible and stay on the string. And then I can literally feel it as I'm pulling through them, it like sliding through my fingers until that shot breaks. And when I get that, it's like, yeah, that felt good. That was really clean. But I've noticed if I don't think about that one specific thing every time, it messes it all up for me.
So I went through about a week of only working on my hook, and I was sending Tom so many videos, and dude gets tired of me. I can promise you that. So basically, you've got 3 different styles. I started off with a very shallow hook, meaning the string was on the first pad of all 3 of my fingers.
Yeah.
Now, what happens is you have a really clean release that way, but then all of the pressure for that is in your wrist and your forearm, which, again, when you talk about coming into back tension, that's not good, because now you're changing your shot with this, your forearm and your wrist. And then a lot of guys go super deep hook, which another one of my kind of instructors, mentors, recommended a super deep hook, which is behind the first knuckle on all of your fingers. Now, the problem with that is you can really rotate it over your shoulder and into your back really well, but now you've got so much finger that has to come off that string. And like you said, it just takes so much more time, and the string runs through more meat of your finger, and you can therefore mess it up more. And so what I run is what's called a mid hook or a medium hook. So if you can picture this, well, you can. I've got video. So on my first knuckle, well, this is going to be difficult. So on my first knuckle, I want it right in front, like, of that first knuckle.
Yeah.
And then on my middle finger, I want it right behind that first knuckle. And then on the third finger, I run it again on the first knuckle, but kind of in the pad of my finger. And that gives you the best of both worlds. You can rotate it. You're not holding it in your bicep and your forearm. You can rotate it over, because all the pressure is not, right there on the tips of your fingers. But then you don't have so much meat to come off your fingers. So I started running it that way. And so basically what I just showed him is that if you just find a pencil or a string or something and run it across your hand with your fingers completely flat, it's going to go in front of your first knuckle, behind your first knuckle, and then in front of your first knuckle again. And that's how I hook my string. Now, I also have what's called a high wrist. which I'll send you the video that I saw on it. But basically, keeping your wrist, instead of like sinking in, letting it flop around, keep that high wrist, and that's really gonna again pull it out of your forearm and rotate it into your back. And so that's how I do it. And then I never consciously, which I don't have to tell you this, I'm just hearing you talk, I don't have to tell you this. I never think about my release. All I think about is pull, 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 and then I have a trigger. And for me, that's a clicker. For some, that's a feather to the nose or whatever. And my fingers just relax and they come off the string. So I've always heard, I've heard several guys say, imagine somebody's holding a golf ball right here over this shoulder, and you want to try to catch that off your shoulder. So you're pulling it straight behind you. And then what you're going to do is, if you're doing that, your fingers will never like open because you're trying to catch this. So your fingers will just release so you can catch the ball. It's kind of I don't know if that's cheesy or, it gave me a way to think about it though.
Yeah. So when you're actually putting your fingers on the string though, are you, are they tense or are they really relaxed?
They're tense.
They're tense. Okay. Yeah. I've had to kind of relax mine, and that, like I said, this is just all in the learning process for me, which is interesting to hear you state that too, on how you're actually putting your fingers on there. Just because, like, one way that I found is if I do have too much, if I have my fingers too tight on that string, I'll get that where when the shot breaks, my hand comes out away from my body.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it feels crappy, and I can feel it almost catching on my fingers, the string, and this could be too, probably just because you've been shooting longer and you may be a little more relaxed than you think, because you're able to get those fingers to relax. Right. My fingers are like thinking, I have to hold on to that string, don't let the string go. So I do still have to subconsciously, I'm still consciously thinking about my release right now, because I'm trying to make sure that it's correct. But I do find too that when I have what I feel as though probably the correct pressure on there, and I pull straight through, my hand goes, right to my shoulder.
Exactly.
So that's what's nice about it too, is there's those things that are checks and balances. I can say, okay, that one was good. That one was whack. That one was good. But I think once I can establish a shot process, like you talked about earlier, then I'll be really excited to see how it goes.
No, I was going to say the same thing. So like when I set up my hook, like I told you, I think about my grip. I think about my hook. Like I think about, like I go into my hook like this, like anchored up and stiffened up. But you're probably right. Once I switch over into my anchor, I'm not saying like I'm death gripping my string.
Right.
My grip on the string is not stiff, but my hook is stiff, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, so the string is resting in my fingers. I don't know how to say that in a weak way. I don't know. But my hook itself is stiff. And the reason why is because, like, before I ever draw my bow back, I feel the pressure of my string in each finger, because I want the majority of the pressure on my middle finger. And then I want, say it's 50 on my top, actually 60, 30, and 10. Like, so I think about that before I ever draw my bow back. That way the weight of the string is distributed in the correct manner.
Yeah.
So then when I get to full draw, that didn't change. I don't know if I'm explaining this correct at all.
Yeah.
But I just keep my hand in a stiff manner, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I've never even thought about keeping my wrist rigid, that would make complete sense too on a clean shot break, that you have some foundation to be able to pull off of. Are you using a glove or are you using a tab?
Tab, and it changed my life. I was shooting a glove at first, and I don't know if it was just a buddy, or I don't know if it was actually Tom or some, I don't remember who it was, but they were like, you got to try a tab. And I did, and I shot way better. Just a cleaner break, cleaner release, better distribution of the string weight across your hands. You yourself can't, maneuver it as much. And so you have a cleaner break, better weight distribution. And I found that I got a lot better arrow speed out of it.
Really? Yeah, I think I'm going to have to try a tab. So when you anchor, are you actually feeling your flesh of your finger, or is it something on that tab?
Say it again.
So when you're anchoring, are you with the tab, are you actually feeling like flesh on flesh, or is it, the material of the tab? So like when I anchor right now, I'm using a glove. I feel, that glove in the corner of my lip, but it's just not, it's not that precise because I can't tell the difference in which part of the material it is.
I changed my anchor, but before I did, somebody told me like your lip can move a lot. Just because it's in the corner of your mouth, you can go up, down, side, pull it back more, over. So find a hard bone, a tooth. So I went to the vampire tooth, whatever it's called, the I9 or whatever.
Inside or whatever, I think.
Yeah.
No.
So when I was anchoring that way, I was putting the tip of my finger on that tooth because that tooth can't move. That tooth is where it's at.
Your pointer finger or your middle finger?
Either one, but it was my pointer finger. But whatever's working for you. Have you been using your middle finger?
Yeah, it's a good thing people don't see us on this podcast. We're over here playing with our fingers in our mouths and stuff.
So that's going to cause you. I would continue to use your middle finger then, because that's a higher anchor. It gets your knock closer to your eye, which is good for your point on.
Yeah, that's why I started doing that, is because it helped me a ton, being able to move that arrow up closer.
Yes. So continue to do your middle finger. Just take it to that tooth instead of a lip, because your lip will change depending on which way you pull on it. Your tooth won't. I changed my anchor to be, I make a C with my hand and then I put it behind my jawline. So that's mine. Okay. And I found the reason I did that is because the tip of my finger still hit the corner of my mouth right there. So I still kind of had 2 points of anchor with the tip of my finger and the C behind my jawline. And it was just a really steady anchor. But, just like a compound, find an anchor that's going to work for you. What's going to work for me is not going to work for the next guy, and what's going to work for you is not going to work for me. And, it's all different. So just find whatever is going to work for you.
Are you shooting one eye open or one eye or both eyes open?
You're going to get me in trouble here, man.
Why is that?
So, by the way, I did just forward you a video on Instagram of the high wrist, on why to have a high wrist. Okay. That's Tom Klum, owner of Rocky Mountain Specialty Gear. He's one of the top ranked recurve coaches in America. I shoot one eye closed. And the reason I said you're going to get me in trouble is because like 50,000 people have told me. So I'm right hand dominant, but I'm left eye dominant. So to shoot anything, I've got to close my left eye. And I've had like 50,000 people say, you got to switch to left-handed, you'll shoot better. You got to switch left-handed, you'll shoot better. I know that. I'm just too scared and I'm too big of a chicken. I just learned how to shoot a recurve right hand. I don't want to switch. So I have to close my left eye in order to have a good sight picture. If not, I'm looking at the arrow, at a complete wrong angle. So I've got to close my left eye.
You shoot your compound with one eye open?
I've got to close everything. I've got to close rifle, shotgun, anything. Because again, like if you swing your barrel up on a shotgun, most guys keep them both open because they're looking down the barrel with their dominant eye, which is their right. But myself, if I don't close my left, I would be looking at the barrel at an angle because I'd be looking my left eye.
Right.
So no matter what I'm shooting, I have to close my left eye.
Yeah.
And that's not good. Like nobody, don't anybody be like, oh, Dylan closes one eye. That's not good.
Well, that's an eye dominance thing though.
Yeah.
Like my brother and my mom are both that way. They do everything else right-handed, but they're left eye dominant, and they do shoot their bows left-handed. So I'd agree with the other 50,000 people. You, at some point, you may want to look into it, just because like what happened to my mom, is she would shoot really good, when she was using her right eye, and then she would forget one time, and she'd miss by feet. But that's besides the point. For me, is what I'm finding out is my right and left, I don't seem to be as accurate if I shoot with both eyes open as when I shoot when I close my left eye, just because I line that arrow up better. Now I don't know if there's a way I'm sure there is a way to mitigate that. I don't know if most guys that are trying to be really accurate are keeping both eyes open, because I shoot my compound and everything else with both eyes open, and I shoot way better that way. But I've noticed with the recurve, I shoot a lot better with one eye closed.
Yeah, I don't know, and I can't speak to it only because I have a different issue, you know.
Right.
Like if I leave both eyes open and shoot my compound, I'm sorry, my recurve, I'm gonna shoot like 5 inches, probably 2 feet to the left, just because I'm looking at it completely sideways. Now at first I had a bow that was so far cut past center, outside of center, that I could shoot my left eye and hit where I needed to, but that's not good because then the bow is just incredibly untuned. So yeah, I can't really speak to that because I'm in a different situation there.
Right. I'm sure somebody will reach out and let us know.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to know, what's your first hunt coming up with the recurve?
Turkeys.
What state?
Nebraska.
Nebraska.
Yep.
How many turkeys are you going to kill with your recurve this year?
Well, I mean, I'm going to try to kill like 5 or 6, but I'll be happy with 1 or 2, you know. I'm going to try and kill 3 in Nebraska. We got a pretty good spot over there. And so and you know, as a non-resident, you can shoot 3. So we'll just see if we get 3 shots, you know, I'll try and kill 3 over there. And then I've never really tried to kill 2 in Iowa. Usually our birds here, it's like you got 1 week and then they get really educated. So if you don't kill them in that first week, then they're super tough to hunt. But now with the recurve and wanting to, you know, try and kill some stuff with the recurve, I'll probably try to kill 2 with my recurve here. And then I haven't really planned on going anywhere else, but I might throw in 1 flyer somewhere. But I'd love to go 100% on turkeys, but I have a hard time doing that with my compound. So I don't know how well that'll go with the recurve either.
Yeah, man, it's one of those deals where as I've made the switch, things keep coming up where I'm like, should have just had the recurve. Like, and I'm like you, I don't shoot at whitetails past 30, no matter if I have a compound or not. So, well, I mean, why not just take the recurve? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. When you're already putting so much time into it anyways, you know, that's where I think it'd be hard to go. The recurve, you know, you just have to put that much time into it in order to get where you're good enough. Like that's something I have not been willing to. I knew when I decided I was going to switch to a recurve that I wasn't willing to sacrifice accuracy. I wasn't going to say, hey, okay, now I'm willing to shoot at an animal if I can only hit, you know, make groups that are 12 inches. I wasn't going to do that, you know. So if I can only get to the point where I can only shoot 15 yards and that's all that I'm effective at, that's all I'm going to shoot out to. Yeah. Now, that's why I'm going to immerse myself into it, because I don't want to be, you know, handicapped to 15 yards. I want to be able to shoot to 30 yards if I can. But I got to make sure that I can get to that accuracy wise. And so the best way for me to do that is just to completely commit to it and go 100% all in. So turkeys, I'm excited about. I think the one thing I will say too that I really enjoy with recurve, just like you said with your compound, if you shoot bad, it just takes you off, right? And you have so much equipment on your compound that then you're constantly questioning your stuff. Is there something wrong? Like you could be 2 inches left at 40 and you're like, man, I can't hit the broadside of a barn today, you know, and you're all angry about it. Where with the recurve, you know, at least for me, it's been like, if I have like a softball type group, I'm really happy with that, you know, and there's nothing, you know, it's not the bow because there's nothing on the bow for it to mess up. So you know that it's you, which I think in turn will make you a better shot. Now, I will say for me, the thing I'm most concerned about, I'm going to get a 3D target in here soon, is I usually need a group or 2 to be really accurate, you know, and I want to make sure that I can, 1 arrow, I know exactly where I need to put it and it's going to go right there, which is still just an evolution of getting better and understanding what I'm doing, I'm sure. But I want to get to that point, you know, where I don't have to have a warm-up shot or 2.
Right. Yeah, it just takes that time, man. I mean, I don't even remember how long it took me to get there. And then it got to the point where I was practicing cold shots. So in the morning, I would go out and just shoot 1 arrow. And then in the evening, I would shoot for reps. because like you said, I had to force myself into being able to make that one shot. So yeah, I mean, it definitely takes time and effort to get there. Like you said, though, you just have to find where am I effective at, and if that's 20 yards, that's 20 yards, and I'm not going to shoot further than that. And if that's, but like we've talked about, man, like we have alluded to, you've killed 2 booners at 6 yards. You've killed a giant bull at 25 yards. Like most dudes can work with a recurve for a year and get to that point. Like you
Oh
can.
yeah. Yeah.
It's just the question of, do you want to? Like, do you have the work ethic to do it? Because it is a full immersion. Like I constantly am reading and looking up and watching videos and just constantly, because I want to do it, and I want to do it well. So it's up to you. I mean, if you want to do it, you can do it. If not, stick to your compound.
Yep. And you can be accurate with them. I mean, I think that's kind of a misconception. Is I hear a lot of people, that they're like, man, you're gonna have to give up so much. You're not gonna be able to shoot past, 15 yards. And for what I've been able to shoot within a month, I'm pretty confident I'm gonna be able to shoot to 25, 30 yards. But like you said, you just have to immerse yourself into it. And especially once I get to the point where I'm ready to start looking at the tuning aspect and everything, as long as you give yourself the ability to figure it out, you can shoot well with it. But the one thing I would say is don't overbow yourself. So I'm a bigger guy. I'm 210 pounds, and I like to think that I lift a lot. I'm pretty strong. But I'm telling you right now, a 50-pound recurve is a man bow when you haven't been shooting a recurve, because you got no let off.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm starting with 40, just because that really gives me the ability to make sure that I'm focusing more on my form and how my shot is executed than just trying to hold the bow.
Right. Absolutely. And that's that's the number one tip that I would give anybody getting into it, is don't overbow yourself. Even start with a 20-pound. I mean, it doesn't matter. Start with something to where you can develop a shot process and do it correctly and not overbow yourself. And then you work yourself up as those muscles develop and as your shot process develops. Then work your way up to a hunting weight. Now, 40 pounds is a hunting weight. You can certainly kill turkeys with that. Back on the note about the accuracy deal, I had a friend over the other night, and I'm not saying I'm some great shot by any means, but I had a Delta McKenzie, just a little block target at 20 yards, and we were shooting, and he alluded to, yeah, but I like accuracy, whatever he said. I just can't get over losing accuracy, something along those lines. And to close the night, we've been shooting 3Ds all night, but to close the night, I'm like, man, I want to shoot that block target. And I did this on purpose. I'm like, I want to shoot that block target real quick before we go in. And I just shot 2 arrows. It was at 20 yards, and I shot 2 arrows. And at the center of the target, it was a 2-inch circle. And I said, well, hey man, why don't you shoot 2? Finish it off with 2. And first he thought I was being weird, which I was. And so he shot, and his arrows were touching each other, like right in the center of the bullseye. Mine was, one in the bullseye over here, one in the bullseye up here. All 4 arrows in the center of this target and a 2-inch circle. And so we get up there, and I'm like, man, that's smaller than a deer heart. And I said, we both stacked 2 arrows in there. I said, sure, yours are touching and yours are in the very dead center, but all 4 arrows are in the bullseye of this target. So why is mine so inaccurate? And he was just like, huh, that's a good point. And I'm like, again, sure, you hit the Advil and I hit the bullseye, but we both hit the bullseye we were aiming at. Like,
yeah.
End of discussion.
Yeah. And you may have another group where, maybe his is in the top and in the bottom, and you got 2 touching.
Yeah.
Because I've had some shots, some groups, I guess, where, everything feels right. And you can stack 3 arrows in there together too with a recurve.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I'm excited about it. It's been a lot of fun. And I think that to me, it's brought back a lot of the fun in archery, because I'm not trying to get myself to hit a quarter at 40 yards.
100%. Yeah.
I understand that it's not like I'm an inch to the left and I'm like, wow, that was a terrible shot. And my bow is off. Is my sight bumped? Is my stabilizer loose? Is this going on? It's like, and then the next one is maybe an inch to the right or something. Another one's in there. As long as it's, like you said, in that heart, I'm good with it. I'm happy with it. And it's a lot more fun. Now I find days where it's like, man, it would be just way easier to just shoot my compound, but that's why for me, I've taken that option off the table. That's not even the choice. So,
And on those days, I would just encourage people, yourself included, to just hang up the bow and say, you know what, just a bad day, like just a bad day of shooting. And I tell people all the time, like, man, listen, even Steph Curry has bad days of shooting where he's like, you know what, I'm going to pass the ball more today. And there has to be those days where we're just like, I'm just shooting bad, and I'm just gonna go inside. I'm not gonna make myself mad. I'm not gonna start breaking everything down.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go inside for the day. And I've had to do that, or I shoot so much and I'm like, all right, I'm falling apart. Like, time to go in. I want to keep shooting, but it's time to go in because I'm creating bad habits here.
Yep. Or is what I've done is I just move up to like 7 yards, 6, 7 yards. I'm not aiming at anything. I'm just focusing on my form and how the shot feels. I'm not worried about trying
100%.
to hit something specific.
100%. Before we go, let me give another thank you to our friends over at Arrow Junkie. Arrow Junkie sells all of the stuff that you need to build your own arrows, which getting into traditional archery kind of brought back that love and that art for building arrows for me as well. So go check out Arrow Junkie for all the arrow building tools, arrow saws, planers, all of the things you need to build your arrows. They also do incredible custom builds. So if you've wanted a custom set of arrows built, you can get with Arrow Junkie, send them your arrows. They'll build them out custom for you and get them back to you. And they also have some sick apparel. Go check out Arrow Junkie at arrowjunkie.com. Warren, man, thank you so much for coming on, man. It was an absolute pleasure. It's been a joy for me. I by no means am a professional, but I absolutely love this stuff, and I love helping anybody I can. So it's been a joy for me just to be able to answer a couple of your questions. It's been a pleasure, man, and I can't wait to see all the animals you put down with your recurve.
I appreciate it, dude. It's been fun. It's fun talking to somebody about, this new journey, because especially somebody new into it, there's not a lot of people that are shooting the recurves and stuff. So I really enjoyed it, and hopefully I have a lot of animals to show you that I put down with the recurve, but we're going to get there.
Well, man, you'll have to swing through Kansas sometime. I've got 9 3D targets in the backyard. I built a shooting platform on my back deck so I can shoot from 12 feet up, and we just have a little shooting range back there. So next time you're swinging by, man, bring the recurve by and we'll shoot some bows.
Will do, man. I appreciate it.
Well, hey, man, have a good one. Try to stay warm, and good luck killing some turkeys.
Thanks, man. You too.